Kia ora koutou, and welcome to tonight's Goodfellow webinar titled Type 2 Diabetes, Why Not Just Eat Nutrient-Dense Food? Or more specifically, nutrient-dense food that doesn't increase your blood sugar. My name is Pulasti. I'm a GP based in Central Auckland, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for tonight, Dr. David Unwin, a GP from the UK. David works at the Norwood NHS Surgery in Southport, near Liverpool, where he has helped care for a practice of 9,700 people since 1986 as a family doctor. For the past few years, he has been a UK Royal College of General Practitioners expert clinical advisor on diabetes. In his presentation tonight on drug-free remission of type 2 diabetes, David will deal with the nuts and bolts of his approach that has helped 141 of his patients achieve remission. David and his wife have developed a low-carb program that has been followed by over 460,000 participants around the world and enjoys delivering content via X, formerly known as Twitter. So, without further ado, I'll pass on to David.
Well, hello, everybody from a rather wet north of England. And of course, it's 8:30 in the morning here. So this is my team at Norwood Avenue, because this is a group effort, really. And I'm going to tell you the story, how we changed our entire practice in using diet to help our patients, particularly people with type 2 diabetes. In fact, since I gave you the title of this talk, we've three more people have achieved drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. So the observant amongst you will notice that it's now 144 people at Norwood Avenue, my practice, have achieved drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. So I hope you're interested to find out how we've done it. Let's just begin with why this matters. So I'm going to introduce you to a patient. This is Dan. He's about 40 years old. He has very poorly controlled diabetes, as you can see, with a hemoglobin A1C of 95 millimoles per mole. Unfortunately, Dan doesn't just have type 2 diabetes, he also has high blood pressure and is on maximal treatment really for his blood pressure. So the reason this matters is that for every year that Dan has poorly controlled diabetes, he's losing 1/3 of his life expectancy. So this is really very, very serious. And it's the kind of thing that caused us at Norwood Avenue to try harder. Could we do better for people like Dan? The other point is that I started at Norwood Avenue in 1986, and at that point we had 57 people with type 2 diabetes. In the same practice, we've now got over 600. So that's a 10-fold increase in the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. And I imagine that practices all over the world have a very similar experience. And it prompted us to look for interesting new ways to deal with this problem. So this is a happy story. So you can see there is Dan's hemoglobin A1C years ago. And 4 years on, you can see this is drug-free type 2 diabetes remission, sustained, I think, for about 4 years now. And his latest hemoglobin A1C is 37, so that's out of the diabetic range. So what did we do? Well, Dan's problem was what he was eating, because it was supplying large amounts of glucose. And when he gave up bread, rice, and potatoes, this was the result. And if you look at him now, he's absolutely transformed. So this is the kind of transformation that we've done 144 times. And it's very cheerful medicine. It's very exciting. As a young man, I was hoping to make a difference as a GP. But by the age of 55, I hadn't really done anything startling. And it was one single patient taught me about this. This lady had transformed her health as Dan has. And I was intrigued as to what she had done. And she explained to me that she had worked out that really, if you have diabetes, you need to avoid foods that put your blood sugar up. It's astonishing, really, that that patient had to explain that to me, her GP, because she felt I was too drug-based and that I was always giving her medication. And she felt I needed educating about the sources of sugar. That was in 2012, and the rest, as they say, is history, because I was very curious and interested in her approach, and that's what I'm going to share with you now. Oh, the other point is that we find with our patients, as I'll tell you later, that blood pressure improves significantly. So you see, even on treatment, Dan's blood pressure was not satisfactory at 165/95. And now his blood pressure averages out at 134/80. And the point is that Dan's not on any treatment for his blood pressure or for his diabetes. In fact, he's not taking any tablets at all. And he doesn't see himself as a patient. He sees himself as somebody who knows how to look after his health. And that, for me, is really the magic of this approach, where we have activated patients getting brilliant results and looking like Dan. So I've talked already about drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. This actually now has an internationally agreed criteria. These are the criteria. You've got to have a hemoglobin A1C of less than 48 millimoles per mole without anti-diabetes medication, and it's got to be sustained for 3 months or more. This is a reasonably new thing, the idea of drug-free diabetes remission. I think the important point is it gives hope to patients. So that somebody like Dan, when he first came to me, instead of him having a gloomy future of gradually worsening diabetes, instead of seeing diabetes as a progressive deteriorating condition, for many patients, they can achieve drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. And this gives hope, and hope helps motivate people to change behavior. So this is how we've been doing at Norwood Avenue since March 2017 to May this year. So you can see in March 2017, we'd only seen 15 cases of drug-free remission of diabetes. And when I did this slide, it was at 144. Back in 2017, we were, for those people who chose a low carb approach, 31% would achieve drug-free remission. We're steadily learning how to do things better. So we're now getting 51% of everybody in our NHS clinic who chooses a low carb approach achieves drug-free remission. And because about 50% of everybody with diabetes at Norwood Avenue chooses low carb, we've now got 24% of the entire diabetic register in drug-free remission. So we're constantly learning about how to do better, how to improve what we're doing for people with type 2 diabetes. And again, I'm going to try and share with you what it is we've learned so that you can replicate these results in your own practice. And in fact, already practices all over the world are getting results like this, and in fact, published results. One of the good things at Norwood Avenue about achieving drug-free diabetes remission is that we are making very significant drug savings. So that, as you see, every year we're saving on the diabetes drug budget, and it makes our practice the cheapest as regards drugs for diabetes in the whole area. So year on year, we're saving very significant amounts of money because we are not using drugs nearly as often as we used to. This data is nationally collected data. In the UK, the government has figures on every GP practice. So this isn't data I've collected. It's been nationally collected. So here we have another patient. This was somebody with a hemoglobin A1C, as you see, of 62 millimoles per mole. At this point, we cut the carbohydrates, the foods that break down into sugar and put up blood sugar. And you see, we achieved drug-free diabetes remission. But this is a bit of a teaching case because really in primary care, if you're setting up a service, you have to bear in mind the need for maintenance, the need to look after people long term. And you see, probably a holiday happened here or Christmas, and the hemoglobin A1C leapt up, became 106. Now, what would happen in most practices is you would feel that the diet had failed. Now, and at that point, many of you would be starting medication. But the point is, most of these patients, when they drift, it's not that the diet has failed, it's that they're not on the diet and that they need ongoing care. They need reminding and helping and guiding. And you see that when we took this patient back in and we went over, what have you been eating? And they said, well, it's biscuits and cakes and this sort of thing. And we said, well, why couldn't you do what you did last time? And when she repeated, when she did what she did last time, we got the same result as we had last time. So I'm showing you this slide really to make the point that maintenance matters. So if you do show an interest in this approach, you also have to think not only how it is initiated, but how it's maintained over time, because that's absolutely key to what we do in primary care. So a lot of what I'm going to tell you has been published. We've actually published about 20 peer-reviewed papers at Norwood Avenue, but this is the most recent of our papers in BMJ Nutrition. So if any of you want to know more, it is published there. I would also advise, have a look in the supplementary file in the BMJ article, because we've put in the supplementary file everything we can think of that would help you run a clinic like ours. The good news is that internationally, the interest in a low-carb approach to diabetes is huge. And so the altmetric scoring for this paper is very high. And in fact, it is the most popular paper that BMJ Nutrition have ever published. So I think it's astonishing that an old GP like me can be involved in research which is of interest to people all around the world, because what we publish is just audit, really. But there is great interest in the use of lifestyle to improve our patients' lives. So how do we do this? The first thing is I'm very lucky. My wife, Jen, is a consultant psychologist, and she spent her life specializing really in the difference that hope brings to chronic disease. So her input in our practice was key. So first of all, we're going to look at some of the aspects of psychology which have helped us achieve these results. Then secondly, we're going to look at physiology. I think it's very helpful if instead of patients having to memorize a diet sheet, it's really helpful if they can understand what they're doing, because this helps them individualize the diet to their own beliefs, their own budgets. And of course, you want them to enjoy foods that they like. So individualizing a diet is very important, and understanding physiology is key to that. So if we start with psychology, my wife has taught me that patients' health goals, allowing them to make choices and hope, are absolutely key. So we'll be doing a little bit around that. Feedback. So really, how do we know when we're being successful? How do we know what to do more of and what to do less of? So feedback is absolutely key for that, and I use a lot of graphs on that. And then the last thing is not everybody does well. So how are you going to cope when patients appear to be failing? So here's a case, somebody who's done very well. The hemoglobin A1C was 70 and it's now 48. So what was it that motivated, this is a lady, what was it that motivated this lady to change her behavior to improve her diabetes? Well, when she had a hemoglobin A1 of 70, these were all the medications that she was on: dapagliflozin, gliclazide, metformin, simvastatin, allopurinol, amitriptyline, cocodamol, and so on. The point is that unfortunately, the dapagliflozin gave this lady the worst thrush, terrible, terrible thrush. And so she was really motivated to find a way to do without her medication. And when I told her there was a way that she might achieve drug-free diabetes remission, that she might manage to give up all this medication, because that was her personal hope, she was really, really interested. And you can see here, we've managed to stop the dapagliflozin, stop the gliclazide, stop the allopurinol, stop the amitriptyline, stop the cocodamol, and the things for her bowels as well. And really sadly, what was happening with this patient was one thing was leading to another. So she was constipated because of the cocodamol. She was a very severe thrush because of the dapagliflozin. So her life off these medications is so much better. She now believes in herself. But all of this began with tapping into the energy behind her personal health goals. And you learn so many interesting things from your patients, finding out, you know, if you could be free of your problem, what would life be like? So very often you might think about weight loss. And we know that if you lose 10% of your weight, you're very likely to achieve diabetes remission. Weight loss itself as a goal is a slightly empty goal. I'm far more interested in what difference would this make to you. So if you say to somebody, what difference might weight loss make? They'll tell you things like, well, then I could wear fashionable clothing. Or maybe I could breathe better. Maybe I could take more exercise. Maybe I could start to run again. So it's very powerful, setting up an inquiry into patients' health goals. Feedback. As I said already, it's important that our patients know how they're doing. So you can give them a graph. Many of the computer systems now generate graphs. So this is weight loss for this gentleman between 1991 and 2021. And you can see his weight came down from 142 kilos. He's lost, well, a great deal of weight, 40 kilos. For him, though, the feedback that meant more was he wears this belt to remind himself his thumb there is where his belly used to be. And he wears the belt there so that if he starts having to use these holes on his belt, he knows he's gaining weight. So feedback can come in many different ways. And it's worth finding out for patients, how might they know how they're doing? Are they weighing themselves? What are they doing? Some of you who follow me on Twitter will know that with patients' permission, I do graph of the week. So somebody who's done really well, I ask them, you know, you've done so well, you could be graph of the week, and I put you on social media. There are no details shared of the patient. You don't know who they are, but the patients that makes them so proud, and it's part of motivating. They like being graph of the week. That's one way to motivate people and show them they're doing well. Many of those patients take the graphs home and pin them to the fridge door as a reminder of how well they're doing. Reframing failure. So here's somebody who had a hemoglobin A1C of 100 millimoles per mole, very poor control. We reduced the starchy carbohydrates that digest down into sugar, and the patient did really well. Hemoglobin A1C down to 48. But oh dear, life got in the way, and the hemoglobin A1C worsened again, back up to 82. That's a very difficult conversation because the patient feels as if they've failed. They feel as if they've let you down. The trick is reframing failure. So you say, well, you know, you did this really well before. Could you not do it again? And also, you could say, well, why do you think your sugariness has increased so much? What is it about your diet? And instead of having guilt, could you do something differently? So this actually is very often either an all-inclusive holiday or perhaps Christmas. So I'm saying to patients, well, could you learn from how this Christmas went and do next Christmas differently? What have you learned? Instead of beating yourself up about how this has gone badly, what have you learned and what could you do differently in future? I mean, this is how many of us older people, as we get older, we learn from experience. And if we can help our patients learn from experience, they can achieve even better results. So if we look at this patient, the first time we just came down to 48, but the second time that failure was a good thing because actually she learned how to care for herself far better. So the second result was far better than the first one. So that failure we turned to advantage. We reframed it as an opportunity to learn. And that's what she did. So now we're coming to physiology. So explaining the physiology of type 2 diabetes to our patients in a way they can understand. And I'm going to include liver function, triglyceride levels, central obesity and hunger, and of course, type 2 diabetes itself. So I've had these conversations with teenagers and with elderly people. The oldest person that I've achieved type 2 diabetes remission is 92 years old. And for her, it was really worth it because the medication that she was on gave her loose motions. So she had fast bowels and slow legs. So for her to come off metformin meant a great deal. And she lives at home. So she's enjoying good health. Last time I rang her, she was in the garden. So it's really worth trying to help old people as well as young people, but it requires a great skill trying to help them understand what we're saying. So I start off by explaining that the hemoglobin A1C is a measure of how sugary your blood has been over the past 3 months. So from the very beginning, in my consultations, which is 15-minute consultations, I'm talking about sugariness. The next theme is that sugary blood is damaging. And in fact, there is research to show that spikes in blood sugar can damage the lining, the sensitive glycocalyx, the lining of blood vessels in just hours. So we should be avoiding spikes of blood sugar. We should be avoiding our blood sugar going up because it's poor control of blood sugar that does the damage. I think it's very useful for people to understand about the hormone insulin. So I'm explaining that you have this hormone insulin. It's got a very important job to do. It's there to get rid of harmful spikes in blood sugar. And it does this by pushing the sugar out of the bloodstream and inside cells where it can do less damage. And of course, we're going to think about what happens to the sugar pushed inside cells. Well, quite often it can become fat, and this is the link between dietary carbohydrate, central obesity, fatty liver, and as I'll show you, type 2 diabetes itself. So here we have, there's insulin pushing glucose inside cells where it can do less damage. So it's pushing cells, pushing sugar into muscle cells. Certainly that's for energy. But what if you have more chocolate bars, more rice, more potatoes, more breakfast cereal, then you need to run around? Well, that extra sugar is being pushed into your liver, where it triglyceride, and into fat cells, which become larger. And this is how we end up with central obesity. So as you continue to eat more carbohydrate, insulin has more and more work to do getting rid of the excess sugar. So here we have, this is a patient continuing to eat chocolate bars, breakfast cereals, toast, biscuits, cakes, ice cream. And gradually that extra sugar is being pushed into the liver, turned into triglyceride, and it's causing fatty liver. And fatty liver interferes with the good work of insulin. So you become insulin resistant. Your insulin doesn't work as well as it used to. And you need more and more insulin to produce the same results. But unfortunately, at the same time, fat is building up in the pancreas gland, the very gland trying to produce insulin. And so you struggle to produce enough insulin. And these two together takes about 10 years, but these two together create type 2 diabetes. And this helps explain the epidemic of type 2 diabetes I've seen in my practice, and that's going on all around the world because we're eating differently. This isn't a genetic thing. It's an environmental change acting on a genetic tendency. So we're getting insulin resistance. 38% of everybody in the developed world now has fatty liver. 38% of all our friends, all our family have fatty liver. Many of them have a big tummy to go with it, and it's a warning sign of what's to come. Now, insulin doesn't just deal with glucose, it also has an effect on hunger. And it does this by preventing you from burning fat as fuel. Because, of course, we are a dual fuel engine. We can burn fat or sugar. But if you continue to eat biscuits through the days, have little carby snacks, the higher insulin levels actually prevent you from being able to burn fat as fuel. And this is why somebody with central obesity tells you they're hungry. They are, because they cannot access their own reserves of fat. If you go on a low-carb diet, you become a fat burner. So I personally have been in nutritional ketosis for 12 years. So I burn my own fat. So I used to have a big tummy. Well, I've burnt that off long ago. I'm able to burn fat as fuel. And as somebody with type 2 diabetes, that has great advantages for me because it is a safer fuel. So here we are. If you reduce carbohydrate intake, you reduce circulating insulin, you reduce the liver fat. This improves insulin sensitivity. You reduce pancreatic fat, that increases the potential for insulin secretion, and the result is the potential for reversing type 2 diabetes. This is based on the very famous work of Professor Roy Taylor at Newcastle University. He talks of reversing type 2 diabetes. I don't really like the idea of reversing diabetes. I think remission is a better word because it's a constant reminder to me that if I start eating as I used to eat, my diabetes will come back. So I use the word remission. Roy Taylor likes the idea of reversing diabetes. So high blood sugar. How about with our patients that we see this as a puzzle to be solved rather than a problem? I think it's fundamental that we try and see our patients not as problems. Which of you would like to be a problem patient or a problem husband or a problem wife? Much better that we use the idea of let's look at this together. The patient and I, it's a collaborative approach where we're both curious as to where that high blood sugar came from. Well, nearly always with type 2 diabetes, a high blood sugar is something you ate. Of course, I know that illnesses, that drugs like corticosteroids can put blood sugar up. But for most of our patients, most of the time, a spike in blood sugar is something they ate. And the question is, let's ask the patients, where do you think the high blood sugar has come from? What might you be eating that's put up your blood sugar? Now, of course, all of us know that blood sugar is a result of sugar. But where does the sugar come from? It may be sugar itself. But you remember that patient at the beginning who taught me in 2012? I had forgotten, I'd actually forgotten to talk about starch with my patients. This patient was very angry with me because she said, in 10 years of care, you never once mentioned bread to me. You never once mentioned breakfast cereals. She said, Dr. Unwin, you have forgotten that starch is sugar and that is so important. And of course, she was right. And so I began to think about how can I help people understand the glycemic consequences of dietary choices. This begins, of course, with the glycemic index and the glycemic load. So based on this, I found a way to communicate with people what might happen if they eat various foods. And these are my teaspoon of sugar equivalents. These have been downloaded millions of times around the world. They're in 35 languages. What we have here is 150 grams of boiled rice. If you're looking at the glycemic load, is approximately equivalent to 10 teaspoons of sugar. So this makes boiled rice, well, it's a sugar disaster, really, and it'd be far better to eat something else. Boiled potatoes, look, 9 teaspoons of sugar. Chips or French fries, 7.5. Even a ripe banana generates 6 teaspoons of sugar. The good news is that there are many foods that don't put up your blood sugar, and I'm encouraging my patients to eat healthy, nutrient-dense food like meat, chicken, fish, green vegetables, full-fat dairy, foods that don't put up your blood sugar. And that's what they do. So as I say, there are, in fact, this is one infogram. There are 6 others. They're in 35 languages. If you want to find them, they're on, if you just Google Unwin, PHC, and sugar, you can find all of those infograms. I was talking before about feedback. Well, one really good source of feedback is continuous glucose monitors. And this is something using the Freestyle Libre. So here we have somebody with a normal blood sugar. So this is the Freestyle Libre result. They eat what I used to think of as a healthy breakfast. That's what I ate morning after morning, a bowl of fruit and fiber. I added extra sultanas because I like them, with a little bit of milk, but no sugar. But look what happens to this person with that breakfast. The blood sugar is doubled. The blood sugar is doubled. And then look what happens. The blood sugar drops as insulin works. And the point is that person is hungry. And they go back and have another bowl. And I was trapped in this constant cycle of hunger, eating, blood sugar high, blood sugar low, back to biscuits and snacks. And I ended up with diabetes, with central obesity, and with high blood pressure, all of which I've reversed. Now I understand my own physiology. So breakfast cereals. Well, it's odd, really, that we use breakfast cereal for people with diabetes because they already have a thing. This is one of my patients, and they didn't have anything to eat that morning, and they get a thing called the dawn phenomenon. So it's a crazy thing that somebody already with a high blood sugar in the morning, that they then are encouraged to eat breakfast cereals because it's just adding sugar to sugar that is already there and making the problem worse. So this is another one of my infograms showing that even porridge puts up your blood sugar. It's not a good idea to eat carbohydrate if you're trying to avoid a spike in blood sugar. So this is also a patient with type 2 diabetes. And in this case, they're having chicken butter curry with roasted sprouts. And you can see the feedback from the continuous glucose monitor. It doesn't shift. So it's possible to eat nutrient-dense food that doesn't put up your blood sugar. This is the standard diet sheet that we've been using at Norwood Avenue from the very beginning. It's available in all our publications. Or again, if you Google Unwin and PHC, it's a charity we help set up. All of these resources are there. So essentially, we're getting people to base their meals on healthy protein and also turn the white stuff green, eat a lot more green veg. Of course, in the very beginning, you can imagine that these changes in diet could cause our patients to worry about cardiovascular risk. And I was worried about cardiovascular risk as well. And so from the very beginning, we kept careful data of baseline and latest follow-up. And this is the basis of all our published work. So this is the latest paper where we've looked at, we've audited baseline and latest follow-up for the entire cohort of patients going low carb at Norwood Avenue. This shows the baseline and latest follow-up for 186 patients with type 2 diabetes. The duration, the average duration of the low carbohydrate diet at this point was 33 months. So you can see before and after, on average, they're losing 12% of their body weight. The greatest weight loss we've had for an individual was 12 stone. So it can be absolutely transformative for some patients. On average, they're losing a third of the hemoglobin A1C. You won't be surprised to hear that the triglyceride improves by a third, the fasting triglyceride. And this is, of course, because of the nature of insulin turning sugar into triglyceride. The blood pressure improves significantly. This is in part because insulin has a role in renal sodium retention. So when you go low carb, you're actually weeing out salt. So low carb diets help you wee out salt that you've been hoarding, and blood pressures improve significantly. I do have an open access paper on that as well. The cholesterol was improving by 12%. Importantly, the cholesterol HDL ratio, although it's improved by 2%, which doesn't seem a lot, that was a significant improvement. And when you think that these patients are having full-fat dairy, you might find these improvements in lipid profile interesting. So I'm often asked, well, yes, many patients achieve type 2 diabetes remission, but what happens to the other patients that don't achieve remission? So at this point, 94 people had achieved remission. That was 51% of everybody that went low carb. But the great news is another 46% had improved diabetic control after 33 months on the diet. So for the people who chose the diet, only 3% had worse diabetic control at the end of 33 months. So this approach can deliver astonishing results. And it's such cheerful medicine. In every clinic I do, I'm seeing people who look like Dan, people who are better, people coming off medication. It's really a fabulous way to practice medicine. Can it be sustained? So this is a patient who's cut their carbohydrates back in 2012. And as you see, they've achieved type 2 diabetes remission that's gone on for years. The important point is that if your patients are to achieve this, you need to find a way to support them over time, because the world is full of carby treats and snacks and holidays and things that get in the way. And you see this chart jumps up and down a bit. So this patient has needed ongoing support, but it's really worth it. We're supporting our patients with type 2 diabetes anyway. So it's not a lot of extra work to do a really good job. One of the important clinical points is what about drugs that patients are on? So this is a paper that some friends and I published in the British Journal of General Practice. And this is the summary sheet of which drugs are safe with a low carb diet and which drugs need to be deprescribed. So the good news is metformin is perfectly safe with low carb, as are the GLP-1 agonists. Obviously, insulin brings risks because you've got two things that are going to drop blood sugar. So we've got a lot of our patients off insulin altogether. These are obviously people with type 2 diabetes. The SGLT2 inhibitors, it's not the risk of hypoglycemia, but we're having a couple of cases, particularly if the patients become dehydrated, of a euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. So these patients, I'm really careful with them that they avoid dehydration. I will often reduce the dose of an SGLT2 inhibitor. I will often give them a Freestyle Libre so they can monitor what they're doing. So it's quite a specialist area, low carb and SGLT2 inhibitors. What I would say is SGLT2 inhibitors just help you wee out sugar, but is it sugar you shouldn't have eaten in the first place? And instead of starting SGLT2 inhibitors with their very significant health risks, should we be trying to help patients do better with diet before we put them on these expensive drugs? This is a meta-analysis of 29 RCTs, and you can see here that the lower the diet is in terms of carbohydrate, the greater the improvement in hemoglobin A1C. So the conclusion of this very large meta-analysis was that carbohydrate restriction exerts a significant and important reduction on levels of cardiometabolic risk factors in patients with type 2 diabetes. Levels of most cardiometabolic outcomes decrease in a linear fashion against the decrease in carbohydrate intake. The lower the carbohydrate intake, the better was the diabetic control, but also the better were the cardiovascular risk factors, which is exactly what we've shown in the work at Norwood Avenue. Only this is a far bigger, more important piece of work encompassing 29 RCTs. Again, many of you might be worrying about the lipid profiles. So this is a systematic review and meta-analysis done by Liverpool University. It was data from 1,600 people, included 8 RCTs. And they concluded that carbohydrate restriction was giving better results rather than a low-fat diet. So this is astonishing, I know, but here it is in a meta-analysis and work that we've also shown ourselves that you can get very good results by cutting the carbs in terms of your lipid profiles. This is the American Diabetes Association, the consensus report, where they're saying reducing overall carbohydrate intake for individuals with diabetes has demonstrated not some evidence, but the most evidence for improving glycemia. And it may be applied in a variety of eating patterns. So here we are, even from the American Diabetes Association, in their consensus report, where cutting carbohydrates is a respectable and logical thing to do to help our patients with type 2 diabetes. The good news is it's already happening in New Zealand. You've already got experts in this. And here we have an open access paper. There's Marcus Hawkins, one of your own GPs, and Karen Zinn, where they got results very similar to the ones we've got at Norwood Avenue in a population in New Zealand. So we know it can be done in New Zealand. And in fact, these are very exciting times because there's a very generous grant being given by the government of New Zealand for this research, headed up by Professor Grant Schofield in Auckland. So I was in Auckland myself, starting this piece of work in January of this year. So it's already happening in New Zealand, and I hope many of you can join in. Before I finish, a quick clinical thing. Look at this pattern. So this is somebody whose weight has dropped here, and oddly, the hemoglobin A1C has gone up. Now, this is odd because usually when the weight goes down, the hemoglobin A1C drops. If you get this inverse pattern, it needs care because this could be a very ill person. There are 2 possibilities at least here. One is this could be somebody that is a misdiagnosed type 1. So they've actually got type 1 when we thought they had type 2 and they need insulin urgently. Or it can be a carcinoma ahead of pancreas, and again, somebody who can't produce their own insulin. So they put that in. I've only come across it 2 or 3 times, but it's a really important thing that we don't miss it. Where can you find out more? The British Society of Lifestyle Medicine have published a 5-hour CPD online course, and we've chucked everything into this that we can think to help other people replicate our work. So there's a scan code there, or you can just read my papers for free, or there's loads of stuff online about this. So let's finish with a patient. This is Dave on his 60th birthday, one of my patients. His hemoglobin A1C is very high, 108, and he's very heavy, and of course, he's got a big tummy. But only 16 weeks later, he had managed drug-free type 2 diabetes and lost loads of weight. And look at him, a really proud man, transformed. And it's my hope, my real hope, that many of you could appreciate the wonderful experience of medicine that lifestyle can bring about. So my final points are, please remember, for most patients, the cause of type 2 diabetes is dietary. Yes, I know that stress and lack of exercise is really important, but the low-hanging fruit, the thing that's easiest to change, is diet. And that's what we've done in my practice, is what practices have done all over the world. And clinicians everywhere are trying the low-carb approach, and you've seen the research on it, so have a go yourself. Type 2 diabetes drug-free remission can be achieved in up to 50% of people who choose a low-carb diet. In fact, if you try a low-carb diet in the first year of your diabetes, 73% of all of the people will achieve type 2 diabetes remission. So the younger your diabetes is, the more likely you are to achieve remission. My very final point is the concept of just eat nutrient-dense, healthy food that doesn't put your blood sugar up, and see what happens. Thank you so much. You've got to the end, and I think now we're going to look at some questions.
Right. Thank you so much, David. We've had plenty of questions coming through during your presentation, and I'm sure we'll have a few more coming through. So I've just tried to group them in various categories. So I'll just kind of run through some of them. One question we had quite early on, just regarding the data that you presented. Could you talk a little bit about the demographics and the socioeconomic status of the patients you mentioned? I guess maybe some of our viewers are wondering, will it be as relevant for the population that they're looking after here in New Zealand?
Yes. So the first thing I'd say about New Zealand was, of course, that Marcus Hawkins has published work in primary care in New Zealand. So we know it can be done in New Zealand, and there's ongoing, a lot of clinicians are doing it, and there's research. The average patient at Norwood Avenue is 63 years old, the average person with diabetes. They're heavy. On average, they weigh 100 kilos. So they've got pretty big tummy, they're heavy people, and they're slightly older. They're white. The work in New Zealand is particularly looking at some of your indigenous population, but that's what Marcus is doing. So I'm very optimistic that this we've already got published results showing it can be done in New Zealand. So I'm really optimistic you can do it there. There's a lot of work like this in Australia, in South America, in North America, it's in Europe, a lot of work in India, Malaysia. So I've traveled all over the world. I've yet to go to a country where low carb isn't working, or where clinicians are not having very exciting results.
Right, thank you. Next, a few questions just around the interventions you're providing to your patients. So we talk quite a bit about starch. Do you also talk about processed carbohydrates, sugars as well? Where does the balance lie between, and perhaps it's individualized. You did mention it's often individualized with your patients.
Yeah, well, one of the things I should share is we were having to find economic, cheap ways. I talked about the maintenance, and we had no money and no staff. I expect New Zealand is the same. And so we were forced to think of a new way, and we've been running group consultations for 12 years. So on a Wednesday night, we use the big waiting area to have anybody can come. So you can bring your mum, or who does the shopping, who does the cooking. And so we have educational events on a regular basis where we're looking at how to read labels. We're really encouraging our patients to see the dangers of ultra-processed food. And they're horrified when they look at actually what's in the food. And, there's dextrose and sucrose and, this ose and that ose. So we're really encouraging patients to find healthier alternatives. We even do cooking demonstrations. We have to keep it really simple because my patients are not wealthy. A lot of them are just using a microwave, that kind of thing. So we're doing really simple cooking. How do you cook an omelette? How do you make soup? My quickest idea is we try and do things in less than 5 minutes. So we do a thing which is frozen raspberries mixed with double cream, makes instant ice cream that kids love. And then we taste it, and they do. And there's much, much less sugar in that than the ice cream you'd buy, and it's cheap. So that's a really good question. We put a great deal of energy into helping people understand where the sugar comes from and what is hidden in ultra-processed food. My wife is a world expert on the addictive property of ultra-processed food. It's addictive. When intelligent people do stupid stuff that they know will harm their health, you're talking addiction. So ultra-processed food, very similar to alcohol, very similar to cigarettes. You have a terrible problem. I've seen in New Zealand what's going on. The foods people are eating, they often know that it's harming their health. And the point is that moderation never works. Who could have half a cigarette or half a glass of beer? I've had to help my patients with ultra-processed food addiction give those things up altogether. For some people, giving up bread is very, very difficult. But again, I've had some of my greatest, the ones who've lost 12 stone, the ones who've lost massive weight, were all ultra-processed food addicts. Those, and they come to me for bariatric surgery, and we're thinking, but why are you so heavy? Could it be addiction to ultra-processed food? And while they're on the waiting list, we have a go. And these are often younger people. They are enormous with sleep apnea, fatty liver, diabetes, and they are addicts and they need special care, really. But that would be the talk of, and you'd have to have me back for that, because that's a separate talk about the way we run the groups, about what we do for ultra-processed food addiction, because it's very serious. You're muted.
On the topic of kind of low socioeconomic, patients with low income, there's also a question around when you're dealing with that. Are we pushing, I guess, supporting processed foods that are high in fat but low in carbs? Is that an okay alternative? And also there was a question around where does protein content come into the mix?
So generally, I'm encouraging people to have more protein in the diet. I find that a lot of both young and old people, because they're having so much carbohydrate, are not having enough protein. And so we're seeing sarcopenia in our older people, and that's linked to mortality. But I'm also seeing a lot of children who are having sugar with their sugar, little scrawny kids, and they're not getting enough protein. So very often I'm looking for affordable protein. So that's eggs are the cheapest thing, but it may be buying frozen fish for us is a cheap thing. You have to look locally how that can be done. And sometimes, yes, they're having full fat dairy. So we're using full fat plain yogurt with berries, for instance. We're encouraging people to buy the full fat plain yogurt in litre packets because it's cheaper. Now, there is a really useful resource. A young friend of mine has done a free low-carb app called the Freshwell app, which is available internationally. and they've done a budget version for their poorer patients. So they're particularly looking at how will poorer people manage low carb as an app. So that's available and it's free. 100,000 people have downloaded the Freshwell app already. So there are recipe books as well. We've published 7 different recipe books for loads of low carb recipe books. And Karen Zinn has published books in New Zealand. So you already have quite a lot of resources in New Zealand.
A bit of a particular question. One practitioner who deals with a lot of Pacifica patients, and they were asking about taro, which is quite common with Pacific cuisine, and they were asking if you're aware of it, if you have any comments about whether we'd consider that a complex carbohydrate or a nutrient-dense food. I don't know if you can comment on taro.
I have a suspicion. I suppose the thing to do is wear a Freestyle Libre while you eat it. So I often buy a Freestyle Libre and try a food. Many of those blood sugars that you saw were mine because I have diabetes. So I'm the perfect person. Find somebody with type 2 diabetes, feed them taro, see what happens. I suspect that it will put blood sugar up. I don't know, but any of you could find out so easily with a Freestyle Libre. And I would suspect that you'd be better off with green leafy veg where possible and protein.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously the question comes with rice. Mm-hmm. But I went to Malaysia and we did a low carb course there. And what the street food in Malaysia is often green leafy veg stir fried and was a perfectly good alternative and didn't put blood sugar up nearly so much. I haven't been to any country in the world, including Australia and including New Zealand, where it's a problem if you're motivated. I think that's why I started with motivation. Because if you just go to people on the street and say, you need to give up bread, they'll say, I couldn't possibly give up bread. But if they're motivated, if they realize that by giving up bread, they could literally save 1/3 of their life expectancy, now they're interested. And that's why the psychological framing at the beginning is key. Otherwise, people always say, well, I don't understand, David, how you're getting your patients to change the diet because mine won't. And it begins with taking some time in motivation. And that's why I put that in first. Motivation is absolutely key because we're asking our patients to change their behavior, but we're offering them living longer, not using drugs, self-esteem. And some of the people I saw in New Zealand were heartbreaking. Some of the indigenous population, the damage, the actual life they led. If you talk to them what it's like when you can't breathe, they can't bend over, and the leg ulcers, and these people need help. They really do. It's very serious. This is a pandemic. It's a killer. It needs taking seriously. And the drugs, although they're helpful, I see them as a sticking plaster. SGLT2 inhibitors, they're great. You'll wheel all that sugar out, but what's that going to do long term? How is that for young people? Do we even know after 20 years of SGLT2 inhibitors what that will do? And have we not got a responsibility to try and motivate our patients to sort of go to the light, to be healthy?
Thank you. There's also a question someone was asking about portion sizes when we're recommending nutrient-dense food. I guess the concern being, could the nutrient-dense food itself lead to weight gain?
I love this question. This is a good question. Basically, I don't routinely talk about portion control in primary care because I don't need to, because nobody can overeat steak or fish or eggs. They don't. I only talk portion control for the people who don't lose weight or start gaining weight. I have to hone my time. I've only got 15 minutes appointments. I'm in the National Health Service. We have no money. And so if it sorts them and then they see the nurse and their weight's coming down, we don't talk portion control because they've done it. So if they get a result, we don't drill down into the detail. If people are having problems and they're not losing weight, then I do something which is I ask them to do a photo diary of what they eat. So I get them to quickly, everybody has a phone these days, even the poorest people. You never meet somebody who doesn't have a mobile phone. So I get them, could you just take a photo of everything you eat and drink for 3 days? You get some astonishing, interesting results. And then I'm drilling down into portion control. We've had dietitians look at what is it that the patients actually eat. So I think the average calorific intake was 1,300 calories to 1,500 calories was what the patients who achieved remission were eating while they were losing weight. So I suppose that is a lower calorific thing. But those people hadn't been taught about portion control. It happened naturally when they cut out the addictive bread, rice, that kind of thing. It's really interesting, as I've discovered myself, because I'm a fat burner, I'm just less hungry. So I used to be a very, very greedy person who was eating biscuits all day long. I only eat twice a day now. I shan't have breakfast this morning because I'm not hungry. So when you become a fat burner, when you're in ketosis, you are less hungry naturally. So I just don't eat as much. But I have more, I'm 65 and I can run. I can run 3 or 4 miles, no problem. So it for me, it's a win-win, a win-win.
There were a couple of questions around intermittent fasting and skipping meals as a method of both weight management and diabetes management. Any thoughts you have? Do you tend to do you support that view, or do you tend to recommend your patients have regular meals? What's your
Yeah, it's that's discussed a lot in the group consultations we do. Many of the patients go online and experiment, and generally I find they start eating 2 meals a day, many of them. They give up breakfast because of the dawn phenomenon. You tend to have a high blood sugar in the morning anyway. Many of them do give up. They experiment and they eat less often. I certainly would dissuade people from snacking. The more you eat, the hungrier you are. The more you snack, that leads to little spikes in insulin and hypoglycemia. So I dissuade. So first of all, my first step is, can we go from unhealthy snacks to healthy snacks? Could it be almonds? Could it be a chicken leg? What could it be that's healthy? And then I'm saying, could you have maybe bigger meals and cut out the snacking? And then it's up to the patients then. If they get the results they want with the way they eat, why would I criticize them? I don't interfere if I don't need to. If they've got good diabetic control and excellent cardiovascular risk factors, my job is done. I'm only interfering with people who the cardiovascular risk factors are worrying or their diabetic control is poor, and then I'm using more time and more energy to drill into discussing portion control or changing the diet.
You sort of mentioned about how you yourself are in a sort of ketotic state. There was one question around, is there any risk of ketoacidosis on a low carb diet? And then there was another follow-up question in terms of risk of hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state as well. So getting a bit biochemical.
Yeah. So keto, it is, I think, so ketoacidosis in terms of diabetes is when you don't have insulin and also you're generally dehydrated as well. So for me, as a person with type 2 diabetes on no medication, there is no danger that I'll go ketoacidotic because I do have insulin. The only time when diabetic ketoacidosis could be a worry is for somebody on SGLT2 inhibitors, and that's why I highlighted that, or somebody who is not type 2 diabetic at all, but is a type 1 that's been misdiagnosed. They're in some danger. In 12 years, we've never had a single problem, and neither of any of the other doctors I know. The difference between nutritional ketosis and diabetic ketoacidosis is great in terms of the ketones. So yes, my ketones are running at about 2, but no, they don't go up to 7. Okay? And I'm in no danger. It's never occurred to me to even worry. I'm on no medication. I'm a type 2 with excellent blood sugar control. But a good question. It's quite different. Diabetic ketoacidosis is quite different from nutritional ketosis. And of course, patients, they don't have to go into ketosis. That's just what happened for me as I pursued what worked for me. I was interested in when was my health best? When did my brain work better? I discovered that my concentration levels, my vigor was greater when I was in ketosis. I could think better and I needed an hour's less sleep. And I could run better. So for me, that was just the progression. And for quite a few of my patients over the 12 years, they've gone steadily lower carb. But for many patients, I've got patients who begin on 400 grams of carbohydrate a day. That's huge. Low carb is officially less than 130 grams of carb a day. But that same patient at 200 grams of carb a day achieved remission because relatively they'd gone from 400 grams to 200. So it's all about relativity in terms of, well, go lower carb. You may not have to go to ketosis, just cut out the starchy carbs and see what happens. You might be able to have some. And if you're on, some of the patients I saw in New Zealand were having hundreds of grams of carbs a day. Many of your patients are having carbs all day long. Some of them will be 400 grams of carbs a day. So they just need to go lower, not necessarily ketosis. That's what I've done because I felt better.
So I'm aware of time. We probably have a couple of minutes left, so I'll try to squeeze in a couple more questions. Thank you so much for everyone who shared questions tonight. One question was around...
Nearly all, just one question. There's nearly always a question on vegetarians, because that worries people. Was there anything on vegetarians?
Yes, there was one, vegetarian/vegan. Yes.
Yeah, I knew. So one of the infographics is for vegetarians, and it shows how there are benefits from using, as it would possibly, gram flour instead of wheat flour, so that pulses, how they substitute gram for gram protein for carbohydrate. So pulses can be a very much better basis for a meal. So for the Asian people, that's why I'd say use gram flour instead of wheat flour. Wheat flour, you can't believe the glycemic load of wheat flour. Gram flour, it's about 1/3. So that represents a real gain. And using pulses in generally is a gain. For those that can tolerate them, eggs are marvelous. So for vegetarians using eggs. And there is a resource called D Life India. So this is for Asian people who enjoy Asian food. And these are mainly vegetarians, and some of them are vegans, and they're achieving wonderful diabetic control, tasty recipes. And it's a resource on the web. D Life India is marvelous for vegetarians and vegans, particularly if you enjoy tasty Asian food. And some of those recipes are amazing. Use cauliflower rice. Excellent, really good stuff. So that I knew there'd be a question on that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I can see the clock has just ticked 8:45. So I think in the interest of time management, being the good GP that I am, I will wrap things up there. So I just want to extend a warm thank you to David for sharing your presentation and answering so many of our questions. I think it was very enlightening for a lot of the attendees tonight. And yeah, I just want to extend a big thank you to all our participants tonight as well. Thank you for your engagement and your involvement and all the questions you sent through. As I mentioned, our next webinar will be in 2 weeks' time, and we look forward to seeing you then. So thank you so much to everyone who was involved tonight.